Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel. This video is for everyone that's starting in the industry and wants to be a character artist. This is something that I wish I would have had when I was starting up. At the time, I didn't have the knowledge to do this kind of thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this character. This is an outfit from video game. Pretty sure everybody knows who this is. This is Altair's outfit from Assassin's Creed, but this isn't from Assassin's Creed 1. This is from Assassin's Creed Mirage. So it's more of a recent game. The reason why I want to do this is people that are starting out in the industry can see what a AAA geometry looks like. And we're going to go through the outfit. We're not going to talk about like the actual character, like the face, the hands, and all that. Because when you're in the industry, you usually have base meshes for this. When it comes to constructing outfits, it's a lot of different animal. And when I look on ArtStation, there's usually like high poly sculpts, and then they show you the in-game mesh, but you don't see the topology or you don't see UVs. So in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the topology. I'm going to describe certain parts, and then we're going to take a look at the UVs in hopes that it helps people that want to get into the industry know what kind of geometry is expected for video games nowadays. Because from what I saw in Assassin's Creed Shadows, the geometry of those characters is it's the same as the ones in Assassin's Creed Mirage, and if it's different, it's not that far off. So let's get started. All right. Like I said, we have Altair here. This is the in-game mesh that you will find in the game. Now, I do have some things here, because in Mirage, you can do with the hood up or hood down. So let's just do hood up, because it's more fun that way. It looks more Assassin's Creed-like. Now, what I've done is I added the diffuse textures. I've not added the normal maps or any of the other masks that this has, because, you know, the diffuse just tells us what is what. And, you know, it looks nice. Let's start with the geometry, and then we'll move up to looking at the UVs. First, let me go into wireframe mode like this. And I changed the color here in Blender so you can see the wireframe a little bit better. Now let's look at the top part of the tunic. Now I'm going to hide everything else, so we can see first, every time that you make a game mesh, they are usually closed. So they're usually closed like this to a point, especially if there's something over them like a hood. In this case, you're always going to have a hood. In other cases, like from what I've seen in Assassin's Creed Unity or in Assassin's Creed Syndicate, they do have the scarf around it, which is covering this part. So the main mesh for the tunic does have this. And the bottom also, it is enclosed to this. Usually I would close this part too. I don't know why this part wasn't closed, and it's not the belt. We're gonna take a look at the belt in a second. But as you can see here on this side, this is also closed. So when you have a outfit for a character, parts that are not gonna be seen, they are closed into a point. There's no reason to have them open all the way. Every time that I've seen characters, whether from AAA or the ones that I have done in the past, I've always done this because it's what I was taught to do. Now, there's something very particular about this that I didn't used to do, but this is AAA mesh, and I'm pretty sure they do it for a reason. So if we go into edit mode and we select this, and I press Control L, which is going to select all the vertices that are linked, you're going to see that this mesh is not welded in the arms. And if we go into seeing what's inside, you can see the mesh is actually penetrating this one. So it's clipping through, and the tunic, it's actually closed. So this used to be like that. So the way that it was constructed, you can see that this part is closed into a point, and the sleeves are a different part. Now, there's aside from what I think is a rigging reason, this is also done because there's kind of like a seam, like a fabric seam over this part, and it's easy to hide. So I'm not a big into rigging myself. I usually do it with automatic tools, but probably if I was the one rigging this, the one adding the bones, I guess it would be much easier to weight paint if I could separate the mesh, so I can get a much more accurate rigging. Now, when it comes to this part, this is like the underside of the belt. So let's select it and hide everything else. And you can see there's some thickness to it, but this part is not closed. Now, this bottom part, it's kind of like the bottom part of the belt of Altair, like that red, what's it? I don't know what to call it. I think it has a name, but what goes under his belt, under his utility belt, it's kind of like that red part. Now you see that there's nothing in the middle because there's something over it, and you don't want to have polygons or triangles in places where you don't need them. Now, one thing that is very interesting to see, and when I was sort of learning character art, one of the things that they tell you is that you should try as much to avoid triangles. That being said, you can see there's several triangles here in this mesh. And one of the things that I see is you have some triangles here that are meant to be sort of like support loops for the folds. Because here's the thing that I've seen a lot of people that are starting to make characters run into. And this is a problem that I had back in the day too. You always want to make the lowest poly possible. Now, nowadays, you're expected to bake the normals. And when you're doing the baking process, I mean, not just the normals, but world space normal, you also bake the ambient occlusion and all that because it's easier to construct and map those ways, especially if you're working with Substance Painter. The way that you make a low poly mesh that is better to the baking part is something that has enough loops that can encompass that high poly geometry. Because if your low poly geometry is too far off in terms of points from the high poly, then the bake is going to look very weird. You can clean it up afterwards, but it's just going to take too long. So what I mean is you need to have enough points to encompass your high poly geometry, and that's why you see some of these folds here. They go into a triangle, same thing here, because if you reduce the poly count, yes, you should optimize to however your art director is telling you or however your target poly count should be. But there comes a time where too much optimization is going to take away from the baking process. So if you're doing kind of like a realistic game, which Assassin's Creed is on like the realistic type of art, then you do need a little bit more polygons in order to like hold those normals. So let's take a look at the rest of the outfit. I think the hood is also very interesting. It's isolated. So you can see that the hood is not closed, but it does have this geometry back here, which I think this has to do more with the engine, so you don't see the back faces. Thing is, if I'm using this in Unreal, I wouldn't need these polygons because if you do two-sided materials, you don't see the back faces of the polygons, so it's fine. But this may be kind of like an anvil sort of thing. Looking at this loop, if I were to target weld here, here, and here just to reduce geometry, then that would create like very big polygon over here, or I would have to move this support loop, which again, it's not really good. Same thing with this triangle here on how it ends, is because you want to give this geometry good support for your baking, because you could have like just ended this right here where I'm doing with my mouse, but that would have created a very, very big quad here, and you would have lost 2 more points that you can use as support. Now what we're going to do is we're going to move to the UVs. Before we move to the UVs, if you like this video, please leave a like, leave a comment. It helps a lot with the channel. If I see there's a lot of interest in this, I'll make it a series, because aside from Assassin's Creed, a lot of AAA games are going to be made in Unreal, and getting meshes out of Unreal, it's actually easier than it was getting this out of the game. So if I see that this video picks up, then I will make a whole series, not only characters, but also analyzing the actual environment game mesh, because there's a way that AAA companies like those done. All right, so let's move on to the UVs. I want to move to the UV editing section. Well, before we get talk about the UVs, let's talk about the textures. So the way that this character is laid out is he is laid out into 3 different textures. One for the whole outfit, that means the tunic, which the tunic encompasses this red part and the skirt and the pants and the hood. The second one is this part, the part that encompasses everything that's kind of like a belt. So the bracers, this thing with the hidden blade, although I didn't unwrap the hidden blade correctly. This part here with the shoulder pad and everything that, you know, kind of like holds everything that Altair has, including the belt around here. The other texture is actually the knives. That's it. That's why I think the knives are supposed to be like individual and they disappear as you use them. All right, so here is the UVs for this mesh. Let's make this smaller. There's some issues, and it has to do with the way that when I took this mesh out and was separating it, I may or may not have pushed some polygons. But, you know, the main parts are there to what we need to see. So let's look at the tunic. You can see that the tunic is broken down in the seams are right here at this part. So always hide your seams. Your seams are supposed to be in places where the player doesn't see it, because if you bake light, and this goes more for environment art than for characters, if you bake light maps in your engine and you have seams, those seams are going to show. If you're baking maps, those seams are going to show. So always take, you know, be sure that you're hiding your seams as much as you can with other clothing articles and all that. So we select those, you can see them, they're right here, and their seams are pretty much all the way to the back. And I think this is an open mesh if I'm not mistaken. Yep, it kind of is. So as you can see, this part is actually pretty easy to unwrap. Now, as you can see, this one is doesn't have any issues. This is the part that it's closed, and this is the rest of the pants. And you can see the pants here are unwrapped perfectly. I maybe should move them a little bit further down. Over here, there you go. So you can see that is, again, unwrapped by the seams, probably around here and around here. And you only have one leg in the 0 to 1 space. You don't have both. The other one is mirrored, just like the arms. I probably should have used this as an example first, but now let's take a look at this part of the tunic. There's actually this piece over here, and you can see that there's some baking that occurred here. Like, I think they baked the ambient occlusion from the belt over here because it does look a lot better with it. But you can see how the seams are kind of hidden with the hood, and they're cut like around this area. It's actually very apparent to see what it is. And you can see where the part where they closed the mesh. All right. These are very straightforward. Now, when it comes to this, this part, I have seen, it's not common, but I have seen where they do one side in the 0 to 1 and then they mirror the other one. I don't like to do that with something like this, but I've seen it. All right, now let's take a look at the hood. And the hood is a very interesting piece because it's just like this tunic is something that is in front. You don't have to hood. But this time they divided it in half, and it works. You actually don't see the seam. One of the reasons why you don't see the seams is probably because this was done in a program that is either Substance Painter or like Substance Painter, where you can actually take care of this sort of situation. Now, this again is something that it's done to give more real estate, because when you have your player you're looking at your character this way, the player is looking at the hood. So you want the hood to have more resolution than anything else. If you had both pieces here, then you have a lot less real estate for the hood, or you have to reduce everything else. So it's something that you kind of have to balance in there. What do you split in half? What do you put together? Those sorts of things. That is something that I personally would do on a character basis. So it's not something that is one and done. It just depends how your character is doing. All right, let's look at the glove part, which is this. I'm actually going to isolate it, hide the rest, edit mode. There you go. All right, so as you can see, everything here. Oh, I'm sorry. One of the things that I missed was the shoes. So let's just. All right, this part is the belt part. So let's look at this. Whole thing is right down here. Again, this is an open mesh, very easy to unwrap. Now, when it comes to the belts, they have their thickness. So you can see that there's polygons here just to have the thickness part. However, they're not beveled. They don't have support loops because sometimes it's just not necessary. So this is something that, again, I'm just showing you how they do it, but it's something that you need to decide whether you're going to do it or not. Seams are broken down where you don't see it. So again, it's not like you're going to break your seam right here. You're going to unwrap the whole belt. You can see that the whole belt is unwrapped in one single piece. Then we look at this bottom part. So one part that is interesting about this is that if I select this, you can see that it's right here. But if I add this part, you can see that's right on top. So that's also another way to kind of utilize your real estate in the 0 to 1 space. You don't necessarily have to mirror things all the time. Things can be on top of each other, like they are here, and they look fine. You can see they look perfectly fine. So that's another way to do your UVs without, breaking things apart. You see, they are overlapping. Again, it's just saving a little bit of real estate here and there. All right, that is it for that. The only thing that I'm missing is the knives. And if we go to the UVs of the knives, they're actually super simple. It's just one UV, because you don't need one UV per knife. You just unwrap one knife and just instance the others. So there you go. Super easy to do, like tools like this, very small. It's not something the player is going to be, seeing very closely. You just do a little ornament just so it's part of the outfit, but it's not something that the player is going to be on top of. With the reflections and the metalness and all that, that is going to take care of it. Okay, before we're done, there's one more thing that I want to mention, and that is draw calls. Draw calls, you want to have the least possible. What that means is every time you have a material, that's a draw call that the engine has to go to. So you can make this piece look super beautiful, super high-end. You could give one material just for the greaves, one material just for the tunic, one for just the belt, and everything would look marvelous. But that is detrimental to a game engine. You want to have good results, a good looking character with the least amount of draw calls possible, and you do that by reducing the amount of materials. That's part of optimization. That's usually one of the things that I see newcomers to the industry having issues with, is they focus on making a beautiful piece of art, but then when you actually go and look at it, it's not well optimized. It has a ton of materials, everything is 4K, and that just doesn't work in a game engine. All right, everybody, that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching all the way till this point. Leave me a like, leave me a comment. My socials are down below. Let me know what other things you like to see next. If you like this kind of video, let me know what you like to see, what part of a character, what part of the environment you like to see from games. I want to start doing more things for games and game artists. So yeah, just let me know what specifically you want to see and I'll do my best to get it. Of course, I don't have access to every single game. If the game is made in Unreal, it's easier for me to get the asset. But there are certain ways how I get these other assets. Just in case you're wondering, the way that I got this asset is with the tools that they have to mod these games. So all the way to like Assassin's Creed, Assassin's Creed Mirage, because Shadows doesn't have mods yet, as far as I know. If it has mods, there are ways to take out the assets. So I decided to do it for educational purposes. That is it, and thanks again for watching. We'll see you in the next one.